Well, hello out there, and welcome to Zoom Hope Live. It is a joy to be able to have you again with us. Just tune in as we come to you with hope from your living room, your washroom, your kitchen, wherever you are, maybe in your car, just sitting in the parking lot, wherever, just allowing hope to come into your experience. Well, today we have a really good lineup for you. We're going to have a wonderful discussion, and I know you will enjoy it. We have a really excited panel that is ready to just talk about the blessing of connecting across generation, with it being a vehicle of hope. Well, today in our panel, we have Pastor Latoya Wright. She's an author, she's a poet, a songwriter, a motivational speaker, and of course, a mentor, and she's also an entrepreneur. She serves the North American Division as administrative assistant, and now she is continuing in ministry elsewhere. We also have David Salazar, who is the youth director of the Washington Conference, a good, very good friend of mine. He's also a doctoral candidate in intergenerational ministry at the Andrews University. You would know also Dr. Peter Joseph, who is an educational ministry strategist and a family life, discipleship, and evangelism consultant, and a certified family life educator. So we are here, all of us, we're here, and we are just we're just gonna go in it, and we're gonna have a wonderful time in our discussion today. So gentlefolks, welcome to Zoom Hope Live as we have our discussion today. Welcome all.
Okay. Good to be with you here. Thank you, Pastor Larry, for the invitation.
Thank you too.
Oh, awesome. So today, as I've indicated earlier, we will be talking about connecting across generations, a vehicle of hope. If you take the time to study the trend of what actually is going on when it comes on to transmitting faith from one generation to another, particularly faith communities and homes are failing in a significant way. There is, and maybe we will talk about it a little bit, the rise of the nuns and the religious unaffiliated, where particularly Generation Z and millennials are moving away from the faith. And this is really not far-fetched for me, because there are persons within my scope, persons who are very avid reader of the Bible, who have walked through it all the time, who have studied, but all of a sudden there is some great enlightenment that causes that particular millennials and Generation Z. And of course, if you look back, you'll say, well, maybe this is not new, but the emphasis now, it shows that there is a breakdown. And the question that plagues my mind is, will there be any hope for faith to be transmitted to the next generation? And as such, I believe the topic today that we will discuss is very germane to what we see going on every day, connecting across generation, a vehicle of hope. So right out the block, let me ask you, what are some of the causes of this gaping gap, this tension between the younger generation and the older generation? And as I've said, in particular, I'm speaking about millennials and Gen Z versus the boomers and the traditionalists.
I guess I'll go first here. One of the things about
yes, and just before when you're not speaking, you could just mute your mic and just unmute and just chime right back in. All right, thank you so much. So go ahead, Pastor David.
Yeah. One of the things about tension is that tension is needed. Tension is good. Tension brings about understanding. It showcases our blind spots. And that's often what we don't want to admit, that we have blind spots. And so as new generations come with brand new ideas, with different experiences that they have, that the world has changed, and that's the world that they engage in, that's the world that they know, that's the world that they live in. They are trying to formulate ideas, they are trying to formulate a lifestyle within what they know. And so when they come encounter with the older generation that has had their own experiences, and they're accustomed to operating under a certain way, you're going to have tension. And oftentimes that clash is that, oh, you know, these people don't have any more respect like they used to, but they are engaging in the world in different ways that the previous generation never even thought to engage. They didn't view it as important. And now, especially when we let things go, the next generation suffers the consequences. And so now the new generation is having to respond to tragedies and negativities in society, and they're speaking out against it. And so when that tension comes, it seems like, all right, okay, we're fighting against flesh and blood. But the new generation is fighting, trying to correct steps that had been left behind and neglected.
If I can piggyback off of that, you know, we all of us, including the nature, you know, plants and animals, and we all operate in systems, right? We have family systems, we have societal systems, community systems, and within those systems are quote unquote rules or laws, and that is values, how we treat each other, what we deem are important. We have culture that influences that, and so when you add on the belief system or Christianity system, it takes its root in the acceptance is in the root of what gives me value, if that makes sense. And so we hold dearly to those things that we find our identity in and our value in, and we protect that to a T. It doesn't matter, you know, what it is. It's our possession. It's what has given us that next relationship bond. And so if anyone would strip that away, we will fight for it and we will take that, right? We won't let it go easily. And so with each generation that comes, there is that value system in there that is the foundation of the core of that particular generation. So what my grandmother and her friends and peers thought was important to them, when my mother came along and challenged that because something else was more important, it was still important, then my grandmother and her unit would there goes the tension, you know, because now it's challenging the mindset of what's important to you is not what's important to me. And we have to learn how to coexist with what is important. And now we have this generation, the younger generation. I have 3 children. I have 3 young adults. And in seeing and working within the school system and our Adventist school system, when you see what's important to their peer group, may not necessarily be what's on the top priority for my peer group. And so the argument comes in when we're trying to say one is wrong, one is right. instead of coexisting and appreciating where they find value. And for them now, it's social justice, it's the relationship. They don't, we'll be real on this panel, I hope. This generation cares about how we treat people, including the ones that we shun. And they take offense to that, because for them, it's more important for them to treat people kind and to show people that they are part of humanity, where we're looking at rights and wrongs and we put us against them, and we categorize people based on quote unquote their behavior. And so when this generation sees that we consider ourselves to be the church, but yet we're going against what they think is important, there is a clash, because this generation, we mince our words, they don't. So learning how to coexist and to see that we all think the things are valuable. But I don't know if we were taught that. I don't know if our foreparents were taught to coexist and to appreciate what we all think is valuable. I don't know if we were taught, like Pastor Salazar said, to appreciate tension, because through that we grow. And so that's, to me, one of the things that it wasn't modeled to us in a healthy way, so that we can all grow from it.
Pastor Green.
Yes, Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, the primary the primary social institution,
yes,
for the passing on of faith is the family.
Correct.
If you look at the family, even systemically, as was mentioned earlier, the environment is set, or even the structure is set for intergenerational life. The whole matter of passing on a narrative that will develop the future generations' understanding of his roots, his purpose, his vocation, right? It is something that is absolutely valuable. And what is going on here now in the world is that we have had mega trends that have affected the function of the family as it relates to generational transmission of what's normative, right? Like faith. The matter of tension, right, is something that is necessary. However, the narrative that should be passed on, that develop relationships, that see tension as something valuable, right, it's really negligible, because families are in a very weak place at this time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the starting input as it relates to this gap. And we see it every day. The gap manifests itself in the home, where parents are asking themselves the question, where did my children come from? I do not know them. These strange aliens are in my house, and I do not understand them. So it's very important for us to understand. So the next question, and I was only about to say the church, but I want us maybe to start from there, which is how important is the faith communities in keeping the flame of hope alive in the midst of the many distractions in life. You talk about digital Babylon. That's where my children, they know these gadgets better than me. And I thought I was like, I thought I was the guru, but they know how to get themselves around this so well. And I'm talking about 6 years old and 4 years old. And you can't take these away from them. You can't say, don't use these gadgets and so forth. How can we transmit faith in the midst of digital Babylon, as well as, and traditions are not always negative, but in the midst of, and I put it in quote, traditionalism. And so how do we actually keep faith alive, and how important is intergenerational faith communities context?
Can I start off with this one?
Sure.
And I hope that we do have the space to challenge each other, right?
Yes.
So my first challenge with that is the use of terminology. You know, they have that saying, you know, if Jesus was in the room right now, would you do what you are doing, right? Or would you say what you're saying? And
yes.
and I'm challenged by even that title or that caption for a place where they live. Digital Babylon. I'm challenged by that because it's a space where we live too. Coronavirus has allowed us to become citizens of this space, right? Because this is what we're now using as the main vehicle to spread the gospel. And I've heard that terminology before, and even with the youth that I deal with, and they cringe when they hear that, because it is a space to them that is treasured and valuable and is bringing forth meaningful results, faith results, relationships, conversations, and so forth. And so to deem that this is where they are, they live, and so forth, is to separate a place where they were born into, right? Technology. You have babies now coming out with iPads soon, just because younger and younger and younger and younger, it's been put in their hands. And like you said, they know it better than we do, the phones. And I give my son my phone as soon as I get it and tell him, here, figure it out, and then tell me what to do with it. And I'm a very techie person as far as with media. So if they were, or they're listening, or they're here with us, if they're here in that space with us, are they going to cringe or feel comfortable with us talking about a space to pull them out of that they were born into and that's normal to them, and that they do find good things in? Or do we show them that, like Dr. Your mentor mentioned, a way to pass the baton so that it's used in the most productive way? Because before they had that, we had something else that our generation before probably called Babylon too, just not digital, but something else. And so in passing that faith baton on, I call it a baton, by passing that on as to how we can teach them that narrative of using whatever space that you were born into, because that's the generation that it has evolved into, using it to the capacity and finding the good in it, so that when they now become parents and their children are in a space age, I'm just throwing it out there, they might be flying cars, you know, by the time their children come, that it won't be looked at as the next level of evil, you know, or Babylon, but that because we've taught them how to live in the space. Right. So I think that's one of the things for me I'm really careful with, because when I speak to them, I need, if my voice is what they're listening to, it has to be something that, a voice that they will continue to invite to the table for conversation, especially when we have information that they don't have because we're older, or we have lived a little bit more life. So so I just wanted to, you know, speak to that. And and just know that they're listening to even how we describe their places that they live and they call home.
Yeah, one of the things that I notice about the faith communities is that previously there didn't need to be necessarily an intentional aspect to it, since in the past, due to limited lifespans, there was up to basically 3 generations. So everybody knew we just have to pull together. We have to do this. Or everybody was just, all right, I just have to wait a few years and then it'll be my turn. Now that we live in an age where medication and different things allow us to live a lot longer, we have even 5 generations coming together under one church, and therefore you have people we're not willing to give up. And it's not necessarily that they want to be rude about it, but they feel comfortable, they feel good about serving God. And since they're living longer, they're living stronger, they can continue to do it. And so the younger generation doesn't have those same opportunities coming sooner. And so therefore today it is critical that churches develop intentional ways to bring about a community togetherness, that everybody is heard, that everybody is given the opportunity. This digital platform right now during COVID, there was a young adult meeting here in the Northwest. And one of the young adults saying, you know, that now that churches are meeting on Zoom, he says, for the first time, I feel like I have a voice. Why? I always went to church, but the people in front were leading out. I just had to sit down. Now that we're on screens, there is no hierarchy. And so I feel that I can input because we're all together. They may still be the head elder, but on screen, we are all level. Now I truly find that I have a voice in the church. So I hope this time of that has taken away what we love so dearly has also brought us to a point where we can recognize, hey, we weren't paying attention to that. We need to pay attention to all these different people because we can learn from them and they are important.
Yeah, great, very interesting and enlightening comments, Pastor Green, were just made by the two panelists. I was reading a book by an extraordinary youth leader, and he confessed in that book that if he would have an opportunity to go back over youth leadership, he would have been more intergenerational, meaning that he would have had parents play a more prominent role in what he was doing. And I thought about that. I thought about youth leadership taking on what Timothy Paul Jones calls a family equipping aspect, right? That's where the church is. That the church has an equipping responsibility, right? That the church needs to equip, because the research shows clearly that parents, by and large, know their spiritual responsibility to their children, meaning they know they're supposed to do it, right? But they don't know how. And they have agreed almost unanimously that the church has not even ventured to ask them if they need help, right? Some of the research would show that. So in Ephesians chapter 4, if you look at that, you see that God has given the church gifted leaders, right? Youth leadership, that's a part of the gifted core of leaders in the church. So what do we do as leaders? We have an equipping responsibility. We have to be able, if we are serious about generational or religious transmission across generation, or faith transmission across generation, then we have to understand where parents are, and the church has to play a role in the equipping. And the role that the church is going to play really is to help parents to be spiritual leaders.
That's
right? That is going to be important. Now, as I said, some great things were just said by your panelists here. As I listen to, I'm still having problems remembering the names, but the female pastor, the female pastor kind of got me to chuckle, because I remember years ago back in Antigua growing up, whenever you were going to town, they asked you if you're going to Babylon. Right, so we had our issue of Babylon, right? So Babylon seemed like a across generations, right? So but I think it's she's correct, because you have to be careful how you communicate a narrative to people. We all live in Babylon at this time, digital be it. The Hebrew faithful, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel, right? They did live in Babylon. Their faith tested and tried, and they did use the good of Babylon. Of course, avoided what was not good. However, understand that the primary social infrastructure, the pass on faith, is family. These men that I mentioned, right, had families. Okay, here again, I'm saying that family is in a weak place, and it would appear from the research that the church, in terms of providing equipping for families, parents, that seemed to be
is very important. Yes. So you see Pastor Duncan was just joining. I did not send him the link. So sorry, he got the link late to join. Now, in terms of, let's talk a little bit about resilient faith, because it's that kind of faith that has kept past generation. It's that kind of faith that has kept biblical generation as well. Talk about there's a whole hallmark of faith. And when we look at the persons who are recorded in Hebrews, Abraham, he came out of paganism, as it were. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we start to look at the different patriarchs and prophets in the Bible. All of them had to encounter the realness of life. So let's talk about that. What are some of the benefits of connecting across generation?
Yeah, I'm going to be brief here, just to bring back again what one of the panelists said. The whole matter of listening to one another, right? And you could see it, right? You could see what God intended in the family. You go to Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? Parents are told, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And in the Shema, that which is the Shema, this is what you ought to do. Teach the children so and so and so and so and so and so. And it goes all, because the intention was actually intergenerational. This is a benefit. This is a benefit. Generations learning from generation. I think I'll stop here just to hear what the others have to say.
Are you gonna go? That's right.
Sure. Okay, so let's maybe establish what resiliency is. What do we mean by resiliency, or resilience in faith? And so when I think about it, and back to what your mentor shared, that's the ideal, right? That is the ideal. That is the formula. That is a formula. But because our family systems are not, I don't want to generalize, but because the enemy has attacked the family system, and we have many family systems that are not as strong as others, through whatever the attack has produced, whether you have divorce or single parents or economy or the social, whatever it may be, we're losing the ability to name what resiliency is. So we can say it, but unless we're able to break it down so that it's tangible, that we can show examples of what resiliency is, even in our everyday doing, it won't translate to spiritual resiliency. It won't, because we have to see it manifested in the flesh in order for us to connect it in the spirit. So with resiliency, how I describe it is the ability to face whatever life throws at you and not stay in a state of heightened trauma or in or underneath. So you can either have the high active response to it, or it can depress you and burden you down. And so resiliency means that you're able to bounce back. You're able to get back into that center. So something happens, my mother dies. It will either send me one way on top or at the bottom, depressed, or I'm just hyper. Resiliency means that I can go there, but I gotta bounce back. And we have to teach each other how to do that and to find resources that will bring us back, happy places. And the family system is where we find the beginnings of these happy places. So for me, my grandmother, her presence is a happy place for me. The beach, I'm from St. Lucia. That's a happy place for me because pathfindering, that's it. Pathfindering, being on the beach, pathfindering was a happy place. So we have to teach our children, but we can't teach what we don't know ourselves. We know the word, but what does it mean? So being able to then translate that. Also the joy of the Lord, what is that? That's a resource. That is a resource we can go to, we should go to help us be more resilient, so that no matter what's going on with me, there's a part in Jesus, that joy of knowing that he's with me even in the darkness, that will help my mind not stay in the dark, and I can come back to a more centered place. That's resilience. Now it goes to when we can translate that to a spiritual place. When the enemy attacks me, I may be down for a minute, but I'm not staying there, right?
Yeah.
He may take my, whatever, I might feel sad about it, but I'm not staying there because I have a happy place. And that is the resilience. That's the resiliency. So when we're not around as parents, when the system fades out with the generations dying away, these are gold nuggets. These are tangible things that we can leave with the young people, so that they know, I got to go to the word because there's a happy place there. This is where I find my resilience. And I can use the example of those in the word and people that I know, because I've seen how they bounce back from adversities. And that's how we build our muscles, our resiliency muscles, so that we don't stay down for too long.
I see Pastor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Pastor Green. I'm happy that both pastors touch on this point of resilience. Now, it's Dr. Joseph spoke to the importance of the family in nurturing, building this resilience. What jumped out at me, right, is this. When we look at the apocalyptic literature, when we look at Revelation, well-known verse, Revelation 14, verse 12, that we preach and teach here, is the patience of the saints, they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus Christ. The word patience there is translated as resilience. Now, this tells us that the church has a responsibility. While the family, the immediate family has a responsibility, the church, the remnant church, has a responsibility to nurture this attitude of resilience in all generations. It is the responsibility of the church. It's a characteristic. Resilience and nurturing resilience is a characteristic of the remnant, as Sabbath keeping and the faith of Jesus and all the other doctrines. Nurturing resilience is a characteristic of the remnant, and nurturing this resilience in all the generations, right? So this is a very important point for us to note, as the church moves forward and as we shift gears. This is not keeping the generations and nurturing resilience. It's something that we can't just push aside. It's a characteristic of the remnant church.
The thing about resilience, it creates spaces of narratives, of conversation, of stories, especially within families and across generations. Resilience, you love to hear stories of battles, of how people overcome. And when we hear stories of people overcoming, it provides encouragement, it gives us strength, it gives us ideas for our own life. And that's something that families, unfortunately, are letting go in the good intention of wanting to create safe space for children, in trying to create areas where children can always be happy. They lose the significance of what joy is. And just, I'll give you an example. Different times when at church school, naturally parents got upset at times with the teachers, and it was quite often that I could hear, the parent come back to me and they would say, you know what, I think I'm going to be pulling out my kid out of church school because I am upset with XYZ, whatever happened with their child. And I was telling, well, what are you teaching your child on how to manage conflict? So each time later on, when they're all off on their own, they come in conflict, they all of a sudden know, yeah, the response is go somewhere else, instead of fight through, instead of continue, instead of building resiliency in their life to say, we will get through this, we will overcome. We shortchange them and say, just go somewhere else for happiness. And we know how that turns out in various ways.
Yeah, and think about it, because this right now we're going through Corona, and as much as we can rejoice to the fact that the church, like never before, is in the cyber world, there are people, if faith is not fostered and strengthened, they will lose their faith. We see what is happening in the United States of America, in particular, with the whole issue of George Floyd, where he was murdered and so forth. A lot of young people now even start to even question their faith, turn what is happening on, why is it that Christianity is not doing more? And so that idea of resiliency, it's very potent for us to show the faith community and the home. Sometimes the faith community have to teach the home, as Dr. Joseph was saying earlier. But I have seen it. I have friends who I am now identifying are going through this. So there might be resiliency in terms of making it in life, pursuing different paths. But when it comes on to resilient faith, yes, I'll be thrown in the fire, but this faith will not be moved because of the realities or the letdown in life. So I am really enjoying the discussion that you guys are taking, the direction that you're taking.
I just want to just throw something in here, right? One of the important understandings I would say that we need to wrestle with is to constantly connect abstraction with what is concrete, right? Because many times I think we lose value for what is abstract. And it's very important, right, that we pay attention to that and then connect it to what is concrete. Theory, for instance, people may not like theory, right? But it's important to learn theory, right? And when you learn theory, then you understand a lot about practice, right? When the theory is actually practiced. When I was at Andrews years ago, I had a statistics teacher by the name of Kijai, I think Dr. Kijai. And in those days, we had to learn the long formulas and do the long formulas of probability and all that. Today, thank God for technology, right? Thank God for digital Babylon.
Amen.
Right. So you have to deal with all that. No, but what he said is something I'll never forget, because you really begin with some long theories and long formula, and then you reach a point where you summarize. And he said this: anytime you summarize, remember, you lose details. Anytime you summarize, remember, you lose details. This is what's going on in the generations now. While seeds of greatness are in millennials, right? And seeds of greatness are in the adoptive generation, right? It would appear from what we are seeing, right, that details of narratives that lead them to a past that they need to understand, roots, right? We are not seeing it, right? We are not seeing it. And so it's important, right? It's very important that even though there are some things that may be abstract, and it's amazing that lots of researchers now are saying this in terms of intergeneration, because you got some folks saying, oh, don't let the children come to church with all the older folk, put the children by themselves. And but we know about people learning different stage, different age and so on. But take it from me, the researchers are showing again that at a certain point, having all the generations come together, right? We learn from one another. And even when you think that young people or even children, right, may not be getting it at that point, right? More things in many situations, more things are caught than taught. Right?
Yes, yes.
So being there and the Holy Spirit is in operation, right?
Yes.
A lot of things can happen. And the Holy Spirit can move people from abstraction and take them into concrete experiences. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. So Pastor, Dr. Joseph, this is what I'm getting. Are you saying then that young people, in particular, of course, children's ministry, etc., but let's say youth ministry now, youth ministry are not looking for youth leaders that are activists, trying to, let's pull together a group of young people to take over the church. But they're looking for spiritual leaders that will connect them with their seed, with their foundation. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's even unfortunate that youth leadership could even reach a point where leaders could think about, let's take over. And to me, the blame doesn't even rest on the youth leader or the youth of this generation. The blame rests on the generation before that has not carried out its responsibility.
Yes. And that responsibility is to mentor and pass on the key chain of leadership.
Transmission must constantly take place.
I wanted to piggyback off of Dr. Joseph's comment. I feel like you're pulling out what I want to say and then you're saying it.
We feed on one another. Believe me.
Yes. I'm really blessed. I'm really blessed to still have my grandmother alive, and that my children have a great grandmother alive. Right. who is sharp in mind, who remembers things more than I do, and who has information from her mother and her grandmother, and so forth and so forth. And part of that gap, just we're talking about the baton again, and the tension, right? Before you pass, when you in the transmission of a baton, there is a point where both hands are on it, right? And I would call that the tension, because somebody has to drop it. Somebody has to drop it. And the natural narrative or process is that the one who's passing it has to drop it. They can't hold on to it forever because the one who's taking it has to take it. And so the cycle goes. But with that passing on, as you talk about the information, one thing that, again, I shouted from the rooftop. There are things about life that, unfortunately, our forefathers did not get they didn't get it from their parents, they didn't get it from their parents. And so you can't pass on something that you don't have. And one of the things that I know that we are missing, and we really need to try to start, and it starts with us, is, well, a couple of things. Authenticity, because we hear it all the time from the younger generation, but it's not a cry of just a younger generation. We all crave authenticity in each other. And that starts from the facing of the truth of our truth. And what is that? Our story. And because the enemy has put the spell or the attack of shame on us, especially, you have in certain communities who have very, very bloody histories, or pain, a lot of pain in their histories. In order to move past it, we tend to cover it. We tend to not want to talk about it because it's too painful, right? And that's the truth of just humanity. We want to survive, and so we'll block it off so that we can keep going. Sometimes talking about it is too painful because there's no resolution. But that has become a practice for us, even within the church, and it starts from the home. There are things we don't talk about. Like I said, I grew up in the islands. You don't take stuff out of the house and even bring it to the church, because somebody won't be able to sit or lay down later on because their behind will be cut up, And so this level of secrecy, and in the name of protecting, in the name of protecting the family name, in the name of protecting the church name, in the name of protecting and protecting and protecting, has watered down authenticity and the stories, the details that are missing. You can see that I don't look like what I've been through. None of you know my story. But if I tell you my story, you may say, oh my gosh, you don't look like what you've been through. And that's where the power lies. And we are losing that power component, where our young people can see people overcome and also stand firm in that overcoming, that I can share my story without the shame because I have overcome. But I have to share the truth of it and how God came into the ugly, so that I can give you tools for when you go through your spiritual battle, and then pass that on. So this idea of storytelling, which is biblical. Everything Jesus did was through a story. Before he even tried to get get people to get the point, it was a parable. He told a story of this. There was a man, there was a woman, there was a child. And it's through the art of storytelling where we share the details and then the point. This is what I mean by that. It's something that we're missing. And it's vital, because it is a foundational component. It's a biblical component, because the whole Bible is our story. It is the story of humanity. It's the story of love. It's the story of mankind. But we've lost the art of storytelling, even in our own personal stories. And the parts that we tend to leave out are most of the times the part that is the catalyst for someone else to feel that they can make it too.
Yes. Arrogance is a dangerous thing in intergenerational ministry. Of course, if you want to chime in, back or forth, you can do so. But I just want to add this to the conversation. It's a dangerous thing. So can we speak a little bit about the mutuality in learning and sharing across generation? I don't know everything because I am young and I'm in the Babylonian age, digital Babylon, as opposed to you, Dr. Joseph, who I have to help to start a Facebook account, or you can say, well, I know more than you. Look at all these books behind me. You see them? I've read all of them. You can't teach me anything. What is arrogance? How important it is for us not to have that in the context of intergenerationality?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
remember, right? As you said that, Pastor Green, I remember when we were at NCU, there was a lecturer, a new lecturer that came. Yeah, let me not call the name. So this gentleman came to the class, and we were having a discussion. He was rather hostile and arrogant, to say the least. So we're there having a discussion in the class, and he had a point to share, but the students in the class, we had a different worldview. So we were trying to bring our point across, and then one of our colleagues was bold enough to say to the lecturer, in a very polite manner, "Sir, just as how we can learn from you, you can also learn from us." And then the lecturer blurted out, "No, no, 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 no. You are here to learn from me. I cannot learn anything from you." It was the height of arrogance. So there we had a university lecturer training budding pastors.
Millennials and Gen Zs.
Millennials and Gen Zs, right? No, I believe it was just millennials then. I don't believe that the Gen Zs would have been in that class.
Yes,
Right?
Gen Z would be there. Gen Z would be there.
Oh, you sound like you were in the class.
No,
So,
based upon the time.
You heard? So,
all right.
So there we had, right, a bunch of budding pastors, millennials and Gen Zs. And then we started to think of the arrogance and the hostility of this lecturer. Just to piggyback quickly on what, I didn't get the names earlier, the female pastor, just to piggyback quickly on what
Pastor Wright.
What Pastor Wright, she made a very poignant point, right? When it comes down to storytelling, I have realized that the millennials and the Gen Zs are prepared to listen, are palpitantly anticipating the stories from the previous generations, from the baby boomers and the other generations. We want to hear the stories. But you know the sad reality? The storytellers are silent. It's a sad reality. The storytellers are silent. And even when they share the story, most of them keep some of the most important parts of the story, they keep it to themselves, right? So it is very important in nurturing this generation that the previous generations feel open in sharing the story. And we just can't be arrogant and hostile like that lecturer at that university.
Piggybacking off of that, the stories, arrogance leads us to not share stories, pride, because we don't want to lose, what they may think of us. And I remember my dad constantly says this, and he says, older people give good advice because they no longer can give bad examples. They've lost their strength. They've lost, that daring spirit to do all these different things, and no longer do they want to share those moments in their life with the younger generation. So often where they're going to be going through counsels. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, all these different things. Because if they still had a younger age, if they were at a younger age, they probably would be doing all the things that now they're saying don't do. And there it goes, where that arrogance right there and that pride, it limits you from sharing who you were, the authenticity and the truth about who we are. And when, as a young person, I don't hear that kind of authentic truth, it automatically makes me want to say, you know, I'm tired of listening to you. You know, you may have some good advice, but I want to hear you. I want to see what it was like for you, how your story can fit into my story and how it can help my story. But oftentimes when we don't come with the vulnerability, when we don't come with where we came from, the mistakes that we encountered, the mistakes that we did, then oftentimes we just come out with that arrogance. Here is what you need to know, or life, rather than here, I'm here to be a mentor. This is where I failed. This is where I messed up. And we often learn from, unfortunately, more from people's mistakes than from their successes. That's why leadership books, it's good to have all these leadership books and read them. But if you really want to grow as a leader, I heard someone say, read biographies of leaders. See what they did, not just here are the concepts.
I think the gift of me being a female is at this moment that I can ask you, my fellow male colleagues, if we can consider an additional word to the words that you've given already. So there's arrogance and there's pride. There's also shame.
Yes,
There's
yes.
also shame. And shame may carry a little bit more weight in here because of this perfectionist society that we live in. And oftentimes, unfortunately, using the word of God to beat people, thinking that it carries that message of being perfect. When I say perfect, meaning we are all human. It's humankind, and we're here in a sinful world of mistakes and getting up 7 times 7 and forgiveness and grace. And but this idea of the sackcloth of shame that we see run through the Bible too, it is numbing and it silences voices. It silences voices because a lot of our experiences, male and female, right? Male and female, but oftentimes attached more to the female experience. But I feel it's an undercurrent for just humanity on a whole, that if I share certain experiences that have to do with certain subjects, there is a shame component that comes in there because how could you do that as a Christian? But you know, those kinds of terminologies and words that we attach after we want to respond to someone's story. People shy away from that because me sharing my story is not for you to belittle me or make me any more ashamed, because guess what? That story and that experience has brought some level of that already. But to empower and embolden people to let them know this is a safe space. And guess what? We've all, at the foot of the cross, we're all equal. We've all experienced things that we're not proud of, right? We've all made decisions that we're not proud of, but there is the one thing that takes us all higher, and that is called grace. And if I can look at everyone, male and female, within the eyes of Christ and his value system for us, that I'm looking at you as the living flesh of who God is. And so I treat you the way he treats me, because when he sees me, he sees himself, and he won't treat himself bad, right? So even though I make a mistake, as quote unquote, as embarrassing as it will be, my job is to raise my brethren up, bring them into the ark of safety, and to remind them that grace covers even that. and to show them a savior that doesn't talk shame language, because he took that shame upon himself and nailed it, left it on the cross. So where shame comes in, it numbs the story, it mutes the story, because we have not created spaces in our systems, in our family and in the church, for us to be able to share the story where the power is.
Yes.
Because it's transformative, where I could tell you, this is where God took me from, and this is where I am now. So someone can say, if he did it for her or you, he can do it for me.
Yes.
And so then, yeah, pride is that has that component. Maybe male and female are a little bit different, but we can get caught up in this act of Christianity, that I have to look a certain way and I have to be a certain way to be accepted as a viable Christian. And then, so I won't share my story, because that negates it in your eyes.
Yes. Dr. Joseph, I see you're doing a tug of war with the mic with Pastor Asher. So I don't know if you want to chime in.
I think some eloquent responses were given. What I wanted to say had to do with the research that was done by Christian Smith, the National Study of Youth and Religion, that revealed quite a bit about the young generation, particularly in America. Christian Smith and Chrissy Dean, and they came up with a term to describe the generation.
We can hear you, but we can't see you well.
They came up with a term to describe the generation as moralistic, therapeutic deism, I think, right? So young people who are good and who believe that people ought to be happy, but believe that somehow God is only needed when you have a situation for him to deal with, right? Now, what got me in the research was, again, because we're talking about arrogance and shame and pride and so on. The inability of the generation before to accept that they are responsible for the present generation. That's the issue that they have to accept, right? So if you have a generation who is, as they said, deistic, where did that come from? Where did that come from, right? No. To connect that again back to resilience, right? And you started earlier by mentioning certain things, right? The matter of COVID-19 coming in, and here is a person who vowed that he would never be on Facebook, right? Okay, yeah. Right. And guess what? That night, Pastor Green, I hope you have that recorded in your book. That night I had to call you, right? Was it night or day? But I had to learn everything quickly. I had to fall in love with the new technology, right? With social media platforms, and I had to learn it from Pastor Green. I had to fall in love with the new technology.
Let's pause for that. Let's pause for that a little bit. All right, you can carry on.
Right. So and right. So here we are talking about. Forget about the shame that you have a doctorate and you have read all these books, and it doesn't matter, right? Life is lived in a level of reciprocal relationship where you have learning and teaching reciprocally. That is critical if we are going to move forward in any kind of intergenerational success.
Amen. Thanks. I really enjoyed the discussion. We're out of time, but I want to throw this last one because David is a couple hours ahead, so he should be deep into sleep now.
Yeah, Pastor David, it's good. How far are you, Pastor David?
You're back or something. Yeah, so we're gonna take out a big chunk of his time in bed.
How far is he?
2. It's 2 now.
Only 2 o'clock, so I'm good.
Just consider that you're writing a sermon.
Is he in Australia? Where is he? Where's Pastor David?
Washington.
Seattle area.
Oh, Washington. Yeah. Okay.
No, and this is, I know maybe we should have spent some more time in this, but this is very relevant to the context that the world in the last couple of days has.
I think he got disconnected.
Yeah, I hope he can get back quickly.
Yeah, kind of. We grew up together, so I kind of think like him. So let me ask the question that he was about to ask. If we're wrapping up, hold on. He was about to ask this question.
There he goes.
Is he back?
Yeah.
All right.
Unmute yourself.
Are you back?
Unmute, Pastor Green.
Sorry, yes. I see I learned.
You're left. I was just about to ask the question for you because I know where your mind was going as you grew up together. So
Yes. Do you want to ask the question?
Go ahead.
Yes, so it's how important is social gospel to connect with the younger generation. We're talking about like social justice, questions on just equality across the economy and poverty, and we could continue the environment. And of course, this that has taken the world platform right now is racial tension. How important it is to be able to connect with generation, because I am getting that perhaps it's impossible to connect with a generation that is really that those things matters a lot. How important it is. Let's talk a little bit about that as people come to our end.
Yeah. One thing about especially the Old Testament, as God was formulating them into functioning as a society, he provided laws, regulations, legislation that were to create a just society. And therefore, oftentimes, we as Christians neglect that aspect because we feel that it doesn't apply to us, it's too antiquated. But if we take the principles there, we start to see that God is deeply interested in social justice. That's what the prophets were all about. They weren't there predicting here's the time frame of the second coming. They were pointing out injustices that society was doing, that other governments, that other nations were infringing upon his own people, and their own people had accepted the injustices and were in turn, they may have complained, why is God allowing this? But they did it to their own people. And unfortunately, throughout the world, right in my context, the United States, oftentimes we do that against each other based on different color skin, the way that you talk, a different language that you speak, all these different things. And we do it oftentimes even in the name of God, because I remember I was in one church and there were some racist elements there. And one thing I understood, at least I took it, not to make it right, but it wasn't based out of malicious intent. It was just based out of arrogance. They had lost, they felt that they were losing who they were as a church. And as we go into a separate society where there is malicious intent, as we definitely saw and we continue, unfortunately, to see in videos, malicious intent, though, it's hard to pinpoint when you have to speak out against yourself, against people that look like you. Because those are the people that I interact with most. And if I start criticizing my tribe, then I have that, I'm going to start feeling that shame that I am alone, I am isolated. But we often see that in the Old Testament and also in the New Testaments and Christian history. And these people were martyred for standing on true and correct principles. And the newer generation, no longer do they want to separate orthodoxy, right doctrine, from orthopraxis, right living. It has to be combined. If it is not going in the same direction, they say, this orthodox is wrong, and it truly is. Orthodoxy must lead to orthopraxis. If your practice is wrong, then there is something wrong with your belief.
I'm here in the US too. Actually, on Andrews' campus. And it's really interesting because this morning I spoke for a church that has a lot of African Americans. And I had to, even though I am from the Caribbean, this is where I live now. And so even thinking about where you are and the society that you are in and what they're dealing with leads to the messages that you formulate. You just don't preach whatever you want to preach. It has to speak to the experiences that are happening within the community that you're serving in. And it was really interesting because as with the question leading earlier on, and I don't just say youth or young people, everybody is concerned. Everybody knows what's happening. And it would be really hard to say that I don't care in a sense, because there's shared pain and grief. Even with COVID, the whole world is grieving deaths, hundreds and thousands of deaths. And so it's a corporate experience. We have to challenge each other and challenge our faith community to take that same kind of empathy that you have for that particular situation with COVID and transition that to the death of Mr. George Floyd, the injustice that falls there. And it doesn't matter whether you're white or whether you're from the Caribbean. So what I said to them is, as a woman who's from the Caribbean, I am not closely connected to the African American experience because I did not go through slavery the way African Americans did. However, I can relate to pain. I can relate to oppression within my own experience, to rejection, even here in this country, having an accent and being told my accent is not strong enough or it's too strong or whatever the case may be, and simply being a female and a minority female puts me in that kind of shared experience. So I can draw from that and show empathy by putting myself in that shoe and advocate, which is what God calls us to do, to stand in the gap. And if that means laying my life down for my brother, well, that is the highest, that's where the rubber hits the road, because that is what he did for us. Our young people, our youth are seeing, does what you, like Pastor said, I want to see if you're really truthful about what you say to me when you try to pacify me with the word. Because when it comes time for you to show it, I want to see if you have the guts and the courage and the holy boldness to do so. even if it means being unpopular, losing friends on Facebook, being unfollowed, or being told you stand alone. Are you willing to do that? If I see that you are willing to do that, despite what anyone says to you, then I will believe what you say about your relationship with God, your Christianity, or whatever the case may be. It never happens during good times. The test of our authenticity and the truth of who we are in Jesus is seen when we have to make decisions for right or wrong, because anybody can do good things in good times, but in the strenuous times where you risking, if I can see that you will risk for me because it's right, then I can trust you. And when you bring the gospel to me, I will trust that gospel, because I've seen that you have taken the gospel and you have used it as a banner, even if it means that you stand alone. That's what I think humanity is looking for in all of us, including our children and our youth. So we can't never tell them, come. They're not seeing us going. They're not seeing us doing what we're supposed to do, and they won't follow, and they will call us out.
Yeah, so thanks, Pastor Wright. There are two words I hear jumping out, and it's just a pity, Pastor Green, that time is upon us. I have another show to go out in a few minutes. Now, there are two key words that has jumped out at me in this discussion, right? Resilience and now advocacy. Wow. When we look at a doctrine, like the only doctrine that is unique to Adventism, the sanctuary doctrine, we miss a very important point. Christ is our advocate, and if Christ is our advocate, we ought always also to advocate for others. Resilience, advocacy. Christ is standing up for us. How are we standing for others? How are we standing for others? So it comes back to the point that Pastor Shalazar made, right? We can't just know the word theoretically, right? We have to live what is in the word. And this is a sad reality. And I'm going to state it. The issue that we face with generations and with discrimination in the church, outside of the church, it's not just a matter of mere discrimination and generation gap. It's a matter of selfishness. That's what is at the core of everything. It's a matter of selfishness and self-centeredness. Because I have pastored in Caribbean context before. I'm not pastoring in Canada, but prior to coming to Canada, I pastored in a Caribbean context where discrimination among not black and white, but black people against black people, again, just because black folks came from a different country, right? It's just as bad as black and white. So it comes down to selfishness and self-centeredness. And as Christians, we must always remember this. If Christ is advocating for us, we must look out for all those who are downtrodden and all those who are discriminated against, right? And we must advocate for them and show them also the next arm, right? That through it all, they can be resilient by God's grace.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to just make a quick point here. Selfishness gets masked quite a bit. We see these videos and of course we're outraged. But one thing that I started to think about was there was many people that recorded and they were probably outraged to see, look what's going on. But did one person stop recording and say, I mean, and just dive in and say, you know, you're going to kill this man?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to take deep how ingrained selfishness is in our life when we actually think we're doing good. We might be doing some good, but at point there needs to be action. And a lot of people get upset here. They're recording so people can be upset. But here, okay, that's kind of the theory, okay? Present, showcase. Now the practice. Did they do anything for their neighbor?
Yeah, very, very good. Pastor Green, just quickly here. I always believe in matter of social justice, the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. This is critical. Habakkuk chapter 1, the prophet crying out, "How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and injustice and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." I mean, that's just the beginning of the prophet Habakkuk crying out. Why did I read this? I believe some of you might have come across Almeida Wright already. Almeida Wright did some research among Black teens in America.
Yes.
And she coined a phrase, spiritual fragmentation, or fragmented spirituality, I think. Fragmented spirituality. And this is what she's saying. Young Black people in America, they believe in God, meaning, I mean, by and large, but believe in God, that God can help them to do well in their exams, right? God can help them to scale the ladder and make it, professionally. They believe that they have that kind of faith, but the gap comes when they look around and see the injustice in the society, right? Where their own fellow Blacks are murdered, right? Almost on a daily basis, and they can't do anything about it. And they have this tendency to believe that, this thing is so systemic that not even God could deal with it, right? So they move around with a kind of, as I said, fragmented spirituality, as she coined it, right? Social justice is a matter of the heart. There's something wrong with our heart that need to be fixed. Any theology that worth its salt must be public theology. It's how you live. It's lived theology, lived Christianity. Isaiah 58 is clear on that. Loose the straps, loose the bonds, and set people free, because it's connected. Spiritual deliverance,
Yes,
and physical deliverance, they are two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. And anyone who entertains that kind of physical enslavement, prejudice or racism or what, and purports to be a Christian, really is not spiritually free. There's something wrong with the heart. There's some conversion that is needed, because spiritual freedom and physical freedom are two sides of the same coin. There can be no social justice without spirituality. We can't, there's no gap there. There can be no social justice without theology, and there can be no theology without social justice. If we purport to know God and we are made in the image of God, then, as previous speaker says, we are advocate for justice, because that's what God is an advocate for, right? And I think that the matter right now is the matter of the heart.
Yes, yes. That the discussion takes us into deep land, and based upon looking at the faces, and what I am doing now is just see it has taken us into deep reflection, and as we look at what is happening around us, we do not abandon God, because God is the central figure. Is the only one that can bring us together across generation. He's the only one that can bring us together as individuals from different culture, different, I put in quote, race, because he did not create race, he created humanity. So God is that common adhesive that binds us together. So I really appreciate what you're saying, Pastor. We cannot have social justice without God. And if social justice is not exhibited in our lifestyle, in the way we operate one with another, whether it is through race, through prejudice, or whatever it is, through age differences or generational differences, whatever it is, the point is made that if we do not have a social justice radiating from our lives, it means that we do not have God. Powerful point. I really appreciate everyone coming and being a part of the discussion we went over today, but I think it was meaningful for us and also for our viewers. Indeed, it was a learning experience for me. So if you came on late and you're wondering who were these persons who were articulating on the matter of connecting across generation as a vehicle of hope. If you're wondering, we have Pastor Latoya Wright, who is an author, a poet, a songwriter, a motivational speaker, a mentor, and an entrepreneur. A powerful woman indeed. And then, of course, we have Pastor Salazar, who is a good friend of mine. David and I met some time ago as we were connected through Paco, the youth ministry director of the General Conference. And from there on, we find a lifelong friendship so far. and you know, he is the youth director of the Washington Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and he's presently doing his doctoral study in the same topic on intergenerational ministry. Pastor Duncan, who is here with us, he's muted as he's preparing to go and set for another program. He's a pastor of the Meadowvale Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada. They're doing a lot of stuff. You can go on Facebook and watch them. They're doing some great stuff. And of course, you should know by now, my mentor is Dr. Peter Joseph, educational ministry strategist, a family life leadership and discipleship and evangelism consultant. But I would like to add a little bit to that. He is a guru in intergenerational ministry. I'm learning a lot from him, and I'm getting a lot of resources in that as well. So thank you so much for being a part of the panel today, gentlefolks. I have learned so much from you. It was indeed a good interaction, and I hope to have you back again.
Thank you,
All
Pastor.
right. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you. And
Thank
of
you.
course, thank you. And for those of you who weekly you look forward to joining us on Facebook Live for Zoom Hope Live, I can't say how much I am grateful for you, because your presence there, it just shows that this thing that was born out of just a friendly interaction with Pastor Joseph, we know that God is behind it. So you coming in and you chiming in, texting me, voice noting me, whether it's through Facebook and telling me how impactful it is for your context, I appreciate it. Continue to watch. You can do a watch party. You can share the link via WhatsApp, as some people need to connect in your family, in your community, in your church, in our society. And this is a program that will not just connect you, but it will Zoom Hope Live. God bless you, and see you next week, as we will have a very exciting discussion. I'm not going to give it away, but there will be only 2 males, or maybe only 1 male on set next week. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to get some good woman power on Zoom Hope Live. The topic's going to be great. So until then, keep Hope alive and keep the flame burning. God bless you, and have a wonderful evening.